Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. Happy Sunday. For me, it is Friday. Tomorrow we have our ward trunk or treat. I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, I came across this article and there were a few things that caught my eye and I just kind of skimmed through it. So I'm actually going to go through and actually probably read most of it, and I have a lot of things to say. This is called Holy War. Russia now depicts Ukraine invasion in spiritual terms, uh, which is very fascinating to me. Recently on the channel, we've been talking a lot about the prospect of this war expanding into a world war and or a war that would lead to the final war on Israel and the siege of Jerusalem. Okay, so that's why this is interesting to me. Um, so I'm going to read probably most of this, and then I want to show you a few statistics, and then also look at the church in Russia. Okay, because there's a couple interesting things there. So there's just a lot to talk about. Okay, so let's begin. Washington, quote, I promise that we will win this holy war. The Russian officer tells the recruits arrayed before him in a video recently shared by the popular pro-Ukraine Saint Javelin social media account. Continuing, quote, who is fighting against us? People who say that their God is Satan. Satanists are at war with us, people who insist we attend LGBT parades, end quote. Now, among my viewership, I know that there's going to be um, a variety of different views on the war. And when it comes to what he's saying about the West and that their God is Satan, um, I'm not so sure that he's wrong. Now, I'm not talking about the entirety. I'm in the West, I'm in Kansas, USA. So I'm part of the West. My God is not Satan. I know a lot of people, obviously, whose God is not Satan. But um, when we look at the modern day Gadiat robbers who are in high places, when we look at secret combinations, when we look at worldly philosophies, and I wish I could like talk about it more, but I can't. I'm not allowed to. But there's substance to this, like actual substance, that there's people in power whose God is actually Satan in reality. And we know from the scriptures, in fact, all the standard works, they all talk about secret combinations. They talk about, from the earliest days, Satan introducing the way to gain power, to maintain it, to commit murder, to commit theft, in a way that is hard to detect, um, done in secret. And you know, there's just so much. There's just so much I can say about it. I do think that. Well, I know that Satan and his followers can actually appear. The reason why I say that is because we have an account in the Book of Mormon where I can't remember if it was Nahor or Korihor that said that an angel appeared to him and told him to teach the philosophies that he was saying. In the Doctrine and Covenants, we're given instructions on how to detect, basically a true messenger from God from um, a counterfeit, an appearance by Satan or one of his followers, and it has to do with shaking hands with them, because Satan and his followers do not have bodies. So you offer to shake their hand, and you're not going to feel anything. And so I can only assume that since we have that information from the Doctrine and Covenants, that Satan really can appear to people in key places in society, government, business, so on and so forth. Um, so that's about as far as I can go. All right. I'm not going to say that Russia is all good. I mean, they were the ones that were part of, they were the main country that made up the Soviet Union, which was communist and obviously godless, and so they've had their issues. But I wonder if things have kind of changed in Russia. I don't know. I'm going to show you a few things about Vladimir Putin. You make up your own mind. I don't know, but whether they themselves, like the powers in Russia, are good or bad or whatever, um, that doesn't change the fact that the West has really been prone to, um, again, worldly philosophies and the influence of Satan. Okay. Again, I wish I could go into it more. I know some of you before this have already looked into secret combinations, and you know the depths of how far it goes, and others of you have no idea what I'm talking about. I can't do anything about that. You'll have to just search on your own, and you'll have to probably go to different platforms to learn about that. All right, let's continue. The officer's exhortation had nothing to do with territorial claims or the supposed there's certain words I want to avoid here, of the ruling regime in Kiev, both of which were the original pretexts for Vladimir Putin's unprovoked invasion of Russia, which Russia's much smaller neighbor. And by the way, when it comes to this right here, I'm not so sure that they're wrong about that either. um, in fact, it's funny because they actually, if you've watched the Marvel movies, you know that one of the themes, at least in the earlier movies, all the way up to, until like Infinity War, is that you have Hydra, right, which came out of this. Now, this is fictional. This is from the Avenger movies, Marvel, but it depicts how after the war, this actually spread and came into our country and had power, and they changed shape, form, appearance, but it was still the same thing. And I'm not so sure that that is false either. Um, the reason why I say that, I can't talk about that. I'm not allowed to, but some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't. You may have to do more study. Okay. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying that you have to accept that. Okay. So, moving on. Instead, the reference to quote unquote holy war mirrored the increasingly sharp spiritual rhetoric emanating from political and military leaders in the Kremlin who are desperate to retain public support for the faltering war effort. Um, and by the way, I hopefully you can tell that this article is, it leans one way. It seems like it has an agenda of its own. Okay, let me read this caption here. Let's see. A screen grab from a video posted on the St. Javelin social media account via Twitter. The caption says, "We are people for whom there is a mother, father, God, religion, and everything else that the Almighty gave us. That's the whole point." Well, I like that. Yeah. Okay, to a degree, that effort has always involved some reference to spiritual warfare, despite the fact that Russians and Ukrainians share deep roots in the Orthodox Church. Well, I don't think that that's what's going on here, Yahoo. It's talking about the spread of secret combinations, the spread of worldliness that's just been flourishing in the West. I don't think it has anything to do with, oh, well, but they both go to the same church. Those ties have been downplayed as the Kremlin has rebranded the war as an intrusion of Western values on the so-called Ruski Mir, or Russian world, of which it sees itself as the custodian, the sole legitimate ruler, to the exclusion of sovereign governments in Kiev or Minsk, Belarus. Quote, "They are not fighting Christians in Ukraine," a scholar of Russian culture and religion at Wesleyan University, Victoria Smolkin, said, explaining how The justification for the invasion has shifted. Quote, they're fighting Satanists. They're fighting the West. End quote. At a Kremlin ceremony to mark the illegal annexation of 4 Ukrainian territories, Putin described the move as a, quote, glorious spiritual choice, end quote, referring to the nationalist philosopher and religious scholar Ivan Ilyin, who was also an early admirer of uh, this person. In the same speech, Putin quoted from the Sermon on the Mount and invade against non-traditional families, in a seeming attempt to incite homophobia and provide a cultural justification for this war. Quote, the overthrow of faith and traditional values, end quote, amounts to, quote unquote, pure Satanism, the Russian president warned. Increasingly, the Kremlin sees its goal in Ukraine not as quote unquote denazification, the original pretext for the invasion predicated on a grotesque exaggeration of Ukrainian right wing nationalism, but as quote unquote de-Satanization, which has recently become a popular term in Russian media and politics. Quote, by the way, many European leaders are real Satanists, end quote. The right-wing pundit Sergei Mikheyev offered in a recent television appearance, giving a lurid vision of a fallen Western society, a society whose cultural, social, and political values many Russians aspire. Since the start of the war, hundreds of thousands of Russians have fled to the West and elsewhere, apparently uninterested in sharing the Kremlin's vision of a sanctified Russia engaged in endless spiritual warfare. Putin's recent mobilization orders appears only to have accelerated the flight abroad. And you guys, I don't blame them. Like, I don't know how much they know about the war over there. I don't know how much information they have, but I'm sure that they have some idea that the war is not going well for Russia. In fact, I want to take a look really quick at one of these maps. Let's go to the Institute for the Study of War. Let's go to their map. I just want to see if there's been any. I haven't checked today. I want to see if there's been any progress. And by the way, again, today is the 28th. It's Friday. Although I'm going to schedule this for Sunday. Excuse me. At this time, it looks like they're no closer to Curzon. This line right here has been kind of the same. Let's check that. Let's check the other map, because I'm not sure if the Institute for the Study of War, how often they update their maps. Here we go. Go to this. Let's see what this one shows. It's the same. Okay, but yeah, it's not going good. So I don't necessarily blame people trying to get away from that. I wouldn't want to be sent to a war where I'm not well equipped, because that's like a big problem that they're having issues with supplies, equipment, ammo, stuff like that. On top of that, if I didn't have well, I'm not going to go into that, but obviously, if you disagreed with the war, you wouldn't want to fight in a war that you disagreed with, and yeah, so I don't necessarily blame people that are trying to not be part of this. Okay, quote, Vladimir Putin and his enablers have made one thing very clear. This war is not only about Ukraine. They consider their war against Ukraine to be part of a larger crusade, a crusade against liberal democracy, end quote. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said earlier this month. Well, um, yes, yes, in a sense. Again, let me just do a little review of this. Color revolution. Okay. We read an article. Let's do Russia color revolution. This is the one that we've read. So this guy, according to him, he went to some basically defense conferences in Russia where they talked about their concern about what they believe uh, the West is doing in order to change the geopolitical landscape. Uh, a tool called color revolutions. And it says right here Russian military officers now tied the term color revolution to the crisis in Ukraine. Now this is back. Okay, this article is from 2014, so it's not talking about right now. Um, to what they say or what they saw as a new US and European approach to warfare that focuses on creating destabilizing revolutions in other states as a means of serving their security interest at low cost and with minimal casualties. It was seen as posing a potential threat to Russian in the near abroad. I don't know if that's like a typo. To China and Asia states not aligned with the U.S. and as a means of destabilizing states in the Middle East, which we talked about the Arab Spring. I really think that was a result of this. I really do. If you missed that video, let me pull it up and I'll put it in the description below. Um, I could be wrong. Of course I could, but this video right here did World War III start on in 2001. Okay, where I talk about I share more what I think is pretty stunning information, and I think it all ties in. So going back here, when the German Chancellor says that they consider their war against Ukraine to be part of a larger crusade, a crusade against liberal democracy. Um, I think there's probably more to it than that in light of what we just talked about. In that sense, Smolkin says Putin's understanding of modern Western culture is not all that different from Christian nationalists in the United States who see secular society as an existential threat. Quote, there are very significant connections between American culture warriors and Russian world propagandists, Smolkin told Yahoo News. See, and that was the whole thing when Trump was in power, is the left really did not like that it seemed like Russia and Trump got along. And I'm not going to try and like oversimplify things, because things are really complex. There's just so much that we could talk about, and I wish that I could talk about it all, but I'm not allowed to. So, okay. So let's continue. The Russian cultural and religious conservatives espouse a bleak vision that, in their view, requires a militant response to supposedly hostile elements. As the Kremlin ideologue Alexander Dugin recently put it, quote, Armageddon and the apocalypse are unfolding before our eyes, end quote. These terms, Armageddon, apocalypse, they show up in places. They show up in news articles. I'm sure that occasionally they show up in governmental talk, legislatures, other places. But I think this is different. And what's interesting about it is that Biden recently used this term Armageddon. Biden, I did a video about that. Armageddon. Okay. This was a while ago. I don't know if I talked about it on this channel or my other channel, but he was like at some kind of event, like a Democrat event, where he said this. President Joe Biden said Thursday the risk of nuclear Armageddon is the highest it has been for 60 years after the Russian President Vladimir Putin renewed his threats as his military retreats in Ukraine. This is the quote. We've not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think there's like some more that he said, but Yeah, right here. He also so he said at that time, and then he said, "I don't think there's any such thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon." You see, and you also have the main commander over Russia's war. He has a nickname. His nickname is General Armageddon. Let's see. Here, I'll just pull this up. I want to pull up sources so that you know that I'm telling the truth. General Armageddon, who is the brutal Russian commander charged with winning the Ukraine war, and this is him. Isn't this the most Rush the most Russian General Armageddon that you've ever seen? Look at that face. Um, yeah, I mean, just off of looks, he has the job for me. I'd give him the job. Uh, yeah, it looks like he'll get the job done. Um, so it's weird. It's interesting how Armageddon is being used by our side, their side. The general's nickname is General Armageddon. Look at him. Um, but in all seriousness, this may actually be serious. Um, all right, the cost. Okay, the costs have certainly been rising for Putin. What was supposed to be a quick invasion has turned into a grinding war that has seen the Ukrainian armed forces put up a ferocious defense of their homeland with military support from Western allies. As many as 80,000 Russian soldiers have been either killed or injured in the 8-month war. I wish I had the breakdown between killed and injured. Um, I pulled up, I wanted to see if there was anything that had like a list of Russian casualties and all the wars that they've fought, but unfortunately, I have not been able to find that because that seems like a really high number. Again, it is combined injured and fatalities. So, um, but just to give you some perspective, when we look at the United States and its main wars, World War One only saw 53,000. These are fatalities. Okay, the Vietnam War, uh, 47,000. The Korean War, 33,000. So if half of that 80,000 are fatalities, then they've already lost more than the U.S. did during the Korean War. Okay. Uh, you could also look down here, the Iraq War. It was only, and I don't mean to diminish it by saying only, but relatively speaking to these other wars, only 3,800, and then in Afghanistan, only 1,800. So I think it's safe to say that Russia is doing significantly worse than the Iraq war and Afghanistan war, which, in my mind, as I was thinking about whether it was actually going to happen before the war started, I pictured that they would be able to do something similar to what we did with, most likely Iraq being the most comparable scenario. But that has not turned out to be the case. And yeah, the fatality numbers are it seems like already, and it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight for this war. So already, this war that's been going on since February of this year, and right now it's October, it seems that they've already exceeded the fatalities um, of the Iraq war, and possibly the Korean and maybe even the Vietnam War. For all I know, maybe even World War One. If that's the case, that that's mind blowing. Okay, quote. Wars tend to get more holy as they go on. The leaders have to justify the high cost, says Ben Friedman, policy director at Defense Priorities, a Washington D.C. think tank. Ukraine's allies in Western Europe and North America provide a useful foil for the Kremlin, which has never settled on a coherent or convincing narrative to explain why it needed to invade Ukraine. I just feel this article, I feel like it's just so dripping in bias. Quote, they do not want to see us as a free society, but a mass of soulless slaves, end quote, Putin said during last month's annexation speech, depicting Russia as a bulwark against Western materialism and spiritual impoverishment. Well, I'm not so sure that that's wrong either. The sanctification of military operations has been commonplace for modern Russia, which emerged from a stridently atheistic Soviet Union to embrace the Orthodox Church, at least officially. Although the church has great political and cultural influence, Russians themselves tend to stay out of the pews. Yeah, which makes sense because they're probably like the rest of Europe. Um, Europe right now isn't really known for its spiritualism or Christianity. Um, so I wouldn't expect that it would be much different in Russia. Um, so this was the part that got me because going from the atheistic Soviet Union, in which Vladimir Putin was a KGB agent, and then going to this to embracing the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, um, that raised a few questions in my mind. So I looked up Putin's Wikipedia thing. This is kind of like the only place I could find it, if I could find it now. So it says here under the section for early life, in his free time, he enjoyed reading the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Lenin. So, those are like basically the originators, the um, of communism, essentially, right? And in communism is against religion. Um, okay, here he is. Here's Vladimir Putin in the KGB, which was essentially their version of the CIA. Everybody knows that, hopefully. Okay, later. Let's see, is it in this article? Yeah, right here. Okay, religious policy. This is Vladimir Putin's religious policy. I lost it. I lost it. I hate when I scroll in or out and then it like takes me to a completely different place. Yeah, it has to all shift down. It can't just like stay centered. I'm just going to keep it at this size. Putin regularly attends the most important services of the Russian Orthodox Church on the main holy days and has established a good relationship with patriarchs of the Russian Church, the late Alexei II of Moscow and the current Kirill of Moscow. As president, Putin took an active personal part in promoting the act of canonical communion with the Moscow Patriarch, signed the 17th of May 2007, which restored relations between the Moscow-based Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia after the 80-year schism. Sounds like there's a story there. Under Putin, the Hasidic Federation of Jewish Communities of Russia became increasingly influential within the Jewish community, partly due to the influence of Federation supporting businessmen mediated through their alliances with Putin, notably Lev Leviev and Roman Abramovich. According to the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, Putin is popular amongst the Russian Jewish community, who see him as a force of stability. And I'm going to add my own thing here. As most of you know, when I did my interview with Adam Eliyahu, of Israel 365. In fact, if you haven't seen that, I'm just saying this because I'm always getting new people that are joining the channel. So I can't believe how many things have happened since I started this channel. Let's look up Adam. Okay, now let's look up Israel 365. I can't remember what I titled it. Right here. This guy right here, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. So what happened was,
the Bible.
by the way, this is what I used to this is what I used to look like, an Eminem. Um I had done a video using a bunch of their articles, like putting together just like this big compilation of videos, and they caught wind of it because I guess I was driving a lot of traffic to their site. And so I was able to interview one of their reporters, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. He's in Israel. He's an Orthodox Jew. And I'm still not exactly sure why, but Israel 365 set me up with a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, that I could talk to every other week. Um, and I think it's because they're not just a company, but they're trying to strengthen ties between Israel and Christians. That's kind of like their main mission. So anyway, I meet with Rabbi Gedaliah Gurfein. He's done a few things. Well, here he is. YouTube video right here. This is who I talk to every other week, and he's from America. He's been in. I think he said that he's been in Israel for 60 years now, like 50 or 60 years, because he made Aliyah, and he holds like dual citizenship. I was talking to him about the makeup of Israeli society because many Israelis are expatriates of these different countries, America, Europe, like different countries in Europe, including Russia. But there's like a very sizable Russian Jewish community in Israel. And he was telling me that they generally view Putin as good. And just like it says here in the article, that they view him as good, that he's done a lot. Um, I did a video where we were talking about how they were thinking about shutting down the Jewish agency, which is it's kind of like the main, like if you find out that you're Jewish, or if you are Jewish and you're thinking about immigrating to Israel, they're like the main place that you would go to. You would find the Jewish agency in your country, and they would help you with immigrating to Israel. That's like their mission. I don't think it's not like a government agency. It's like a private thing. But anyway, he was saying that the reason why Russia was gonna shut that down wasn't so much because Russia was trying to punish Israel, because that's the way the article that I read. That's the way that it read it, that it was saying it. But it was just simply trying to stop another avenue of people leaving the country as this is going on. So anyway, there's that tidbit that what he said. Um, Okay, wait. So going back to Vladimir Putin. So the Russian Jewish community who see him as a force of stability. Russia's chief rabbi, Beryl Lazar, said Putin, quote, paid great attention to the needs of our community and related to us with a deep respect, end quote. In 2016, Ronald S. Lauder, the president of the World Jewish Congress, also praised Putin for making Russia, quote, a country where Jews are welcome. Human rights organizations and religious freedom advocates have criticized the state of religious freedom in Russia. In 2016, Putin oversaw the passage of legislation that prohibited missionary activity in Russia. And I'm going to show you something there in just a minute that has to do with our church. Nonviolent religious minority groups have been repressed under anti-extremism laws, especially Jehovah's Witnesses. One of the 2020 amendments to the Constitution of Russia has a constitutional reference to God. So this is a reason. This is just 2 years ago that I guess they added a reference to God in their constitution. All right. I wanted to. Oh yeah, the reference for Putin reading Marx and Engels and those people. It comes from this book, a biography of. Well, it's hidden right now, but it's a biography of Putin. So here's the source. I'll put the source in the description below. Okay. Now, when it comes to our church in Russia, I just wanted to point out a few things. Um, I'm actually surprised that this was this recent. April 1st of 2018. This was President Nelson's first general conference since he became president. But that was the conference, which for me, I don't know about you, but for me, it felt like this happened like longer back, like further back than 2018. Church President Russell M. Nelson announced plans to build a temple in Russia. I should have pulled this up. LDS Russia Temple. Let's go to Church of Jesus Christ Temples. This is a private website. So far, they don't have okay construction status. The Russia Temple is currently in the planning stages. No groundbreaking date has been announced. No city has been officially announced for the location of the Russia Temple. However, there are currently only 3 cities in the country where stakes have been organized: Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Saratov. So I find it interesting that President Nelson, of all prophets, was the one to announce this, because this is kind of like one of those historically important temples. Not they're all important, but as far as like ones that stand out in historical context, this is one of them. So President Nelson was the one that announced it. Um, in regards to 2016, okay, it says church says all American Latter-day Saint volunteers, quote unquote, have left Russia. Okay, so Salt Lake City, Utah, as the United States government urges American citizens in Russia to consider immediately leaving the country. So this is look at this. This is February 27th. So this was at the beginning of the war. As the United States government urges American citizens in Russia to consider immediately leaving the country, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints confirmed they no longer have any Americans serving there. Quote, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not have any foreign full-time missionaries in Russia. I can confirm that as of mid-February, approximately 50 young volunteers have taken assignments outside of Russia, given the recent recommendation of many foreign governments advising against travel to Russia, said church spokesman Sam Penrod in a statement to KUTV 2 News Sunday evening. Missionaries in Russia have been referred to as quote-unquote volunteers since 2016, after a law was passed in the country limiting religious proselytizing. If you served a mission in Russia, let me know. Put it in the comments below. Or if you know somebody that has a family member or something. I wanted to show you the membership numbers in Russia. This is as of 2016 as well, according to this. 2016 membership data and population was used for Russia. The last year the church released membership data for the country. So in Russia, they are at 23,000 membership, which let me zoom out so you can see like the entire thing. So you can you can barely see the pink right here. This is Russia. So it's larger than a lot of other countries in terms of church membership, but there's also a good number ahead of them. So, but it looks like they're probably in like the top third of countries when it comes to church membership. So we got that. That's how many members are there. If you compare that to U.S. states, Russia would fall between Nebraska and Mississippi in terms of church membership. So that's the size. So anyway, so that's what's going on with us in Russia. We still have missionaries there. We don't have American missionaries there, but we have missionaries that are called volunteers, and I'm sure that they're restricted with what they can do. they probably like do different like classes or service or things like that. Okay, so it's interesting that Russia has gone from being an atheistic Soviet Union, okay, um, which was overthrown in the early, I think it was 1991 that happened. Um, and now they've like transformed, at least superficially. I don't know. At least superficially, they've transformed into a society that is holding on to religious values. I don't know if it's all just propaganda or not. Maybe there's been a genuine change of heart with many of them. Maybe that country is changing. You know, um, and interestingly, the West has gone the other way. They've become more godless and more moving toward socialism and in communism. So the world is it's a complex place. These are the what's it say in Doctrine and Covenants, like the perplexities of the nations? Uh, Doctrine and Covenants, perplexities of the nations. Isn't it something like that? Yeah, right here. Oh, it's in DNC 88, the second coming. It's the second coming section. Perplex. Let's see what this says. Teach ye diligently. The Lord commanded the prophet Joseph Smith and other church leaders to establish a school where they would, quote unquote, be perfected in their ministry, to preach the gospel and prepare God's children for the second coming of Jesus Christ. He instructed them to, quote unquote, teach one another the doctrine of the kingdom, as well as other topics, including uh, topics relating to, quote, things both in heaven and in earth, things which are at home, things which are abroad. These instructions illustrate the importance of learning both spiritual and temporal truths in preparation for teaching the gospel. President Henry B. Eyring of the First Presidency emphasized the importance of both spiritual learning and secular learning. Quote, "It is clear that our first priority should go to spiritual learning. For us, reading the scriptures would come for us before reading history books. Prayer would come before memorizing those Spanish verbs. A temple recommend would be would be more would be worth more to us than standing first in our graduating class. But it is also clear that spiritual learning would not replace our drive for secular learning. The Lord clearly values what you will find in that history book and in a text on political theory. Remember his words. He wants you to know, quote, things that have been, things which are, things which must shortly come to pass, things which are at home, things which are abroad, the wars and the perplexities of the nations. And he favors not only Spanish verbs, but the study of geography and demography. You remember that his educational charter requires that we have, quote, a knowledge also of countries and kingdoms. There's also an endorsement for questions we study in the sciences. It is clear that putting spiritual learning first does not relieve us from learning secular things. On the contrary, it gives our secular learning purpose and motivates us to work harder at it. So when this phrase is used, perplexity of the nations, that's something that always stood out to me from the time that I was in seminary in probably junior high. And I feel like I have a much better understanding of what this is referring to now. I think it has to do with how the world really works. And it's not just surface level. It's not just what you read from, you know, stuff that's easy to access. It's deeper than that. It requires you to study history. It also requires for you to maybe go to unorthodox places, to people that put things together that aren't offered in the public. in an easy way, if you understand what I'm talking about. Gadiant and robbers and secret combinations, okay? Because they have a lot to do with the perplexities of the nations. That's why when you look at something like this war or any war, you can't just go off of what they're telling you. You have to do your own research, and you have to look at things that other people have found that are public, but that aren't put together for you so as to give you the full story of what's going on, right? Um, so, and what makes it harder is that sometimes you're not allowed to talk about certain things, which makes it harder to share that kind of information, and that's one of the restrictions that I have doing this. But we would do well to find knowledge everywhere. Use good reasoning skills and logic, because not everything you find is going to be true, whether it's from the mainstream or from somewhere else. So you have to be smart about it. But yeah, okay. So uh, okay, I'm probably not going to read any more beyond that, because now it seems like it's just kind of talking about the Russian Orthodox Church and other stuff. What's this say? As the invasion started to falter in April, the editor of Russia Today, Margarita Simonyan, speculated that Russia would soon launch a nuclear strike, leading to World War III and worldwide devastation. Oh, that's nice. There's this other article that I came across yesterday, which was Thursday. Russia moves to ban LGBT propaganda among all ages. Okay. Russian lawmakers backed a bill on Thursday that would expand an existing ban on the promotion of quote unquote LGBT propaganda among children to include people of all ages, a move critics see as an attempt to further intimidate and oppress sexual minorities. Authorities have already used existing laws to stop gay pride marches and detain gay rights activists. Under the bill, passed unanimously on the first reading by the lower house State Duma, any event or act deemed to promote homosexuality online, in film, in books, in advertising, or in public could incur a hefty fine. Lawmakers say that Lawmakers say they are defending morality in the face of what they argue are, quote, un-Russian liberal values promoted by the West. But human rights groups say the moves are designed to outlaw representations of minorities such as lesbians, gays, or gay men, bisexuals, and transgender people in public life. Under the legislation, citizens could be fined up to 400,000 rubles. Oh, which is only $6,500 for well, that's still a lot for promoting LGBT propaganda. Legal entities face fines of up to 5 million rubles. Well, that's got to be a lot. While foreigners found guilty of offenses would face deportation from Russia. Hybrid warfare. One of the key architects of the bill, lawmaker Alexander Kinstein, has denied that it represents an act of censorship. Quote, we are not banning references to LGBT as a phenomenon. We are banning propaganda, and the wording is extremely important here. LGBT today is an element of hybrid warfare, and in this hybrid warfare, we must protect our values, our society, and our children. End quote. LGBT Network, which offers legal aid, has called the bill in quote unquote absurd attempt to humiliate and discriminate against the LGBTQ or LGBT community. Okay, so that's all for that. So you have this going on over there as well. Just interesting things. Would anybody, you know, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago have seen things play out like this in Russia? What they're doing now, just like everything from its spirituality to its laws to the progress of the church in Russia with being able to announce a temple there to the Ukraine war. Like it's just like it's so hard to predict the future. It's basically impossible. Um, we may feel secure in certain things like, oh, this isn't going to happen. That's not going to happen. And I feel like within my lifetime, I've learned that's not true at all. Like you have no idea what's going to happen. It's impossible to say. Um, okay, you know what? Okay, that's going to be it for this one, I think. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share this with anybody that likes learning about these things, and I'll talk to you guys later.